Okay, we are live. Okay. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to CRWS with Smoking Damages. We are here to have a conversation on racism, white supremacy. Hopefully, it shall reveal what it is and how it works. And we're here with Smoky Damages, a Black male victim of racism. And my first question to you, Mr. Smoky Damages, is do you have a definition for racism and white supremacy?
Yes, I do. My definition is the one I got from Neely Fuller Jr.'s code book, which is domination and mistreatment of people based on color. And the way I understand that is people who classify themselves as white, dominating and mistreating people who they classify as not white. And it's a system structure which dominates us in especially Black people out of the rest of non-white people, because we are the furthest away from white, and it dominates us in economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war.
Alrighty, yeah, thank you. So you are in the area of the world known as the United Kingdom. Is that correct?
I am indeed. Yeah, I am in the area of the world known as London in the UK, Hackney to be precise, Stone Union to be even more precise. Yeah, known as area of the world known as the UK. I don't know why they call it the United Kingdom. I'm not exactly sure what united is and what they're united with and who they're united against, but that's what they call it. They call it United Kingdom, as I guess they call the United States. I guess the same questions would apply.
How have you observed racism, white supremacy being displayed over there?
In what way? In each of the areas? In each of the 9 areas, or
in whatever area you've observed?
Personal, I've seen lots and lots of displays of racism, white supremacy. Like I said, as I understand it, racism is a system, and I've seen that wherever you see Black people and you see white people, you'll see that system. Even if you just see Black people by themselves, you'll see that system. Over here, I think the population of Black people is probably about, as far as I understand it, it's probably around, like I say, about probably 5%, I think, or maybe 6%. It's around that sort of area, but please don't quote me on that. But it doesn't matter where I look, whether you look in the so-called health service, you see discrepancy there. Black people are mistreated, dominated and mistreated there. You see people who are classified as Black by the white supremacists, we're dominated and mistreated in what we call economics. If you look at basic economics, but even for now, if I was to just concentrate on in terms of money, what people commonly call wealth or monetary accumulation, in comparison to white people, you can see how Black people live. You can see the type of houses that Black people have. You can see how we live there. You can see how we're treated in the area known as law. You can see, most Black people that I've ever met in my life that reside in this same area of the world have experienced, as I have, horrible treatment at the hands of the police, what we call the race soldiers, as a lot of people call the race soldiers now. No matter where I've been in this part of the world called the UK, I just see just racism everywhere. I have some personal experience with racism, white supremacy. I mean, the reason I don't have a job right now, actually what we call a job, paid employment, is because I was ousted because of direct racism from racist man and racist woman. Quite a few racist men and racist women in a well-known, I'll just call it a well-known bike shop over here, and I'll just leave it at that.
Wow. So a lot of people would assume that Europe is not that racist. Well, what would you say to folks about that, and how do you suspect the white people over in so-called Europe have refined their practice of racism?
In some ways, depending where you go in the UK, in what we call the UK, it can appear that it's more refined over here. Racist man and racist woman have refined their practice of racism, where some of the black people, I'd say most of the black people in the UK, what we call the UK, have we are really, really content to be subjects of the white supremacists, even if we understand that we're suffering ill treatment, and we, I guess, suspect that it's because of our color. But a lot of us have just, I know, we've just resigned ourselves to accepting it. So yeah, when I usually, I mean, it is usually something that I do hear a lot, and I think a lot of it is to do with the over racism. A lot of people, non-white people that I've come across, look at racism as in only the direct, overt stuff. For example, the police. A lot of the police over here don't have guns, but some of them do, and anytime they use those guns, most of the time, if the person is black, you're more likely to be harmed by the people who call themselves police officers over here. If you are classified as black, you're more likely to be harmed. You're more likely to be shot. You're more likely to be tased. You're more likely to get roughed up. You're more likely to get beaten up. You're more likely to get stopped and searched. You're more likely to get any type of you're just going to get racism, white supremacy practice against you. And I think the trap that most non-white people fall into, that we just literally just look at the over slap in the face, call you a nigger type racism, and they think that it doesn't happen over here. But that's a massive, massive mistake. The UK is a massive place, and just depending where you go, you'll find and you'll experience the more overt kind, depending where you go in the UK.
Understood. I'd like to talk about your name, smoking damages. What does it mean, and how did you come up with it?
It literally, it was a name that stuck for a long, long time, from childhood and down through my teenage years, when I used to try and rap and write poetry and stuff. I still kind of write poetry and stuff like that on the, because it's just another thing that I learned how to do. And that was the name that I used to go under and stuff. Sometimes when I used to go these open mic sessions, etc., that's just what it was. And I've been thrown off of the internet various type of things, like on Facebook, etc., YouTube, before, under my own name and stuff, which I thought, just as another tactic, I may as well just use another name, just another pseudonym. So it doesn't really, to be honest, it doesn't actually really mean that much. It's literally was just a rapper name. So I wish I could say it was some sort of deep and meaningful meaning behind the name, but it wasn't. It was just one of my show-offisms that I that I guess I was influenced to do by the white supremacists, and it's just a name that stuck with me. Just literally just a kind of a so-called fun nickname. But when I think about the name, it is actually true. Smoking does damage you.
It certainly does. Can you tell us about how you spent your time and energy before you um, kind of developed your own codification in the system of white supremacy? How were you spending your time and energy prior to um, becoming less confused about the system?
I'd say I was probably spending about 90% of my time in a non-constructive way before I found what is the Neely Fuller Junior Code, or some sort of attempted counter-racist code. And now, since finding the code, probably going back about, maybe, I'm guessing probably around about 7 years ago now, I think. If I was to put it in a percentage wise, I think I probably spend my time about maybe 60-40% constructive, and 60% constructive and 40% non-constructive. Is, I'm still learning, and I'm still quite a work in progress. So I'm really battling and trying to stay codified as best I can, and trying to do something about, in my own way, as best I can. Learning about what racism, white supremacy is, and trying to counter it in the best way that I can. And so I was spending my time really just doing just any kind of non-constructive stuff in economics. The way I spent my time and energy was just on stupid, frivolous stuff, just buying clothes, frivolous sexual intercourse with with white people, with white females and stuff, and just being silly, just being silly, showing off and stuff as much as I could. Because I just brain trashed, watching a lot of different types of comedy. I got into a lot of comedy. What I used to find really funny in terms of comedy, a lot of kind of non-constructive white supremacist comedy, and just doing lots and lots of non-constructive stuff. And I got into writing a long time ago, and I've tried to maintain that. So I'm going to try and do a little bit more of that. I have a little bit of plans trying to write, like some reviews and things like that, film reviews, etc., which I'll try and do. And I'm just trying to use my time and energy as constructively as I can. But it's difficult because there's so many distractions. A lot of times when I hear people, they find the code and they say they're really codified and stuff, but I mean, secretly I know they're not. So I mean, sometimes we like to. That's another thing. We like to lie to ourselves. Even a lot of us that find Neely Fuller Jr.'s code, we think it's easy, and then we try to develop that and practice that in our personal lives, and we find it's actually quite difficult because we've been trained to be so non-constructive. But work in progress, and I'm trying the best I can to be codified.
Understood. And what was that journey like? You discovering racism, white supremacy, and the need for you and you being in your position as a Black male victim. Um, how was that, discovering that you were a Black male victim and you needed to codify in this system?
When I was probably around, say, 6 years old, I had a teacher. I don't know if you guys are familiar with any kind of. Do you know what a gollywog is? Do you know what gollywog is? A sort of like a weird kind of. America. It's a sort of like a kind of a weird Americana picture, like a white supremacist depiction of what a black person looks like. It's like a sort of a weird doll figure that's all black with big lips, big red lips, and big, massive white staring eyes and stuff like that. It's like an Americana picture, a really derogatory picture of a black person.
Like a
right?
racist caricature?
Say again?
A racist caricature?
Oh, definitely. Like those American, there's what they call Americana pictures, but racist white supremacist caricature of what a black person looks like, right? So yeah, and it used to be displayed on this jam jar or marmalade jar years and years ago, and in fact, the white supremacists over here used to be a slang term that the white supremacists used to use for, when they weren't calling us nigger over here and, driving past in their cars calling us nigger and all that kind of stuff and racist graffiti all over the place when I was growing up here, about 6 years old. They used to have this jam jar character, right? On the back of this jam jar character called a gollywog. And my teacher, I was about 6 years old at this time. My teacher, I was at a table and the teacher came down. He said to me, and this teacher was a non-white person. He's a non-white male from South Africa. And he asked me, are you offended by that picture? And I didn't even know what offended meant. And I think he said, looking back, and I think he said, what do I think of the picture? And from that time, that is the first time at 6 years old, I think I'd been vaguely aware of what racism was, but when he asked me that and I looked at that picture, it was almost like he kind of set off something in my brain at 6 years old. And it was very, very hard for me to get it out of my brain at that time. So as non-constructive as I was being and not really wanting to look at racism, from that day going forward, he kind of planted a seed in my mind where I understood that there was a thing called racism. And for a long time, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. Just from that one question he asked me. So I think that's proof positive that if you ask children the right questions at the right time, it can have quite a constructive result.
Mm.
Yeah. And then if you want to talk about like fast forward, like when I discovered the code book, did you want to, or do you have a different question?
Yeah, continue, please.
Yeah, and then fast forward, then I heard different things like I heard a lot of like Jane Elliott and stuff like that on TV, Oprah and stuff like that. I heard there's a guy over here that was quite what we call these days famous. His name is Darcus Howe. He used to talk about racism, white supremacy he didn't call it racism, white supremacy, but he used to talk about racism all the time over here. Various black people over here who were quote unquote famous that used to talk about racism that I was sort of vaguely aware of. And anytime the subject was on TV, I always looked at it. We didn't really discuss racism, white supremacy in my family, in my so-called family, attempted family. What else was I going to say? Yeah, and I got into, I don't know if you're familiar with the Nubian nation. There's a bookshop around the corner from me in a place called Dalston. They had a little bookshop down there, and they used to sell lots and lots of different types of books there, chiefly from this guy called Malachi Z. York. And it was the first time I'd ever been to a bookshop that was just filled with quote unquote what we call black books. Right, a black bookstore that's got many books in there talking about the problem of racism, white supremacy, and then I started checking that out, and then I got into a lot of Ashraf Kwesi from there, and I don't know if you're familiar with Ashraf Kwesi, Dr. Ben Buchanan. I've got quite a few books of his, and then from that, just one led on to another, and then fast forward when I started me and my twin brother used to train Kung Fu all the time, and I kind of gave it up down through the years, and I got back into it quite a few years ago now. And one of my teachers happened to give me this magazine, and it was something to do. I think it said something on the front about diaspora or something, but inside of it was an article where someone was interviewing Neely Fuller Jr., right? This guy called Neely Fuller Jr. And I thought, I just read it, but I was stuck on this article. You know, I should have just. I know I've still got the magazine around here somewhere, but I can't find it right now. But it was an article by Neely Fuller Jr. It's only a page long. But in it he had the 9 areas of activity, etc., etc. And from that time, I just thought I just had to search everywhere just to find where this guy, because what he was saying in there about racism, white supremacy is a system, and it's in everything. It's in economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Never heard anyone speak about it like that. All I'd heard at that time was the blue-eyed, brown-eyed experiment or exercise with Jane Elliott. I heard a little thing about like Tim Wise and other people talking about it, but no one was actually really talking about it in that type of a way. And the rest, as they say, is now.
Understood. So did anyone attempt to teach you or tell you about racism and white supremacy when you were a younger victim?
No. Is the short answer there. I mean, I'd say no, because it was so vague that in terms of what, you know, attempted family, you know, my victim mother, victim dad, no, not really. It's just very, very vague. Just things like, you know, you have to try very, very hard. You know, you have to try harder than white people. That was their attempt, really, at talking about racism, white supremacy. But, you know, we still had a white Jesus and a white Mary and stuff in the house and stuff. So, you know, the programming, the miseducation and the indoctrination is so heavy on the part of the white supremacists. You know, they don't take any days off, but we do. You know, as victims, we're the ones that take many, 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 many days off when the system of racism, white supremacy doesn't, unfortunately. So yeah, I didn't. It was literally. I don't know how. I don't know if I could call it just luck, or if it was because of what that teacher told me earlier when I was about 6. Like I said, I couldn't really get it out of my mind. And as far as I know, like even people at school that I haven't seen for years, sometimes if I run into them and we start talking about racism, white supremacy nowadays, they seem to remember that I was always talking about it in school, in so-called school. And I can't even remember talking about it in school, but they remember me for talking about it in school, which is interesting. I can't even remember what I was saying about it at that time because I was so confused. I'm still confused, but I was even more confused back then. So I can't even remember what I was saying, but apparently they can.
How do you maintain your physical and mental health?
I try to eat as correctly as possible as I can every day. I try to definitely do that. I try to make up my own. I try to make up my own code. I try to add to the code as much as I can in terms of trying to counter racism, white supremacy. I try to read as much of the code. You know, I try and sort of refresh my senses, as it were, in that to remain codified. And in terms of mental health, that's a part of my mental health routine, as I say. And I practice Kung Fu as much as I can. That maintains a lot of my mental and physical health. I always, like I said, I try and eat as healthily as I can. If I do eat any kind of non-constructive meals, then I'll make them as, you know, I try to be as infrequent with that as possible. if I'm going to eat 4 times a day, and I do have any kind of hankering for something that's non-constructive, I try and make that just one meal and have 3 meals are very constructive. And if I'm going to eat all that time in a week, I just try and make one. I try and make 1 or 2 meals that week that are non-constructive, and the rest I try to make really, really constructive. But yeah, exercising, learning how to defend yourself with your body. I think that is one thing I'll definitely suggest non-white people learn how to do. Just learn how to, I think Evolutionists for Justice was talking about that. Just learn how to defend yourself with your body. I think that's one thing I'm glad I learned how to do. I'm not a quote unquote expert at it, but I'm adequate at it, I think. And I'll definitely recommend that. And reading, I'd definitely say, like we said, like Dr. Welsing used to say, reading is better than watching TV. I've got a ton of books, loads and loads and loads and loads of books. I've got quite a few dictionaries. I recommend everyone learn some words out of the dictionary. I found that constructive. I found that very constructive down through the years. Yeah, that's how I try and do that. Good eating, constructive eating, constructive exercise, and yeah, these all contribute to mental health, good mental health or correct mental health.
Understood. Thank you. Earlier, you mentioned area 4 labor. Would you care to elaborate a little bit more on how the racist sabotaged you at your job?
I'm not even sure how much I can go into it, because we had a little bit of an investigation and I kind of left it because it was causing me so much stress. And I left it where they sort of offered me a little bit of a settlement, but I thought it was way, 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 way too low. And then there was whilst I was going through that, there was a death in my family. My aunt passed away. My attempted aunt passed away last year, and late last year, and that threw me off as well. And I didn't really have the mental strength to go with it. And I mean, they were dragging it out as well. So I couldn't really pursue it, but I have a feeling that I probably can go back to it if I can really be bothered to go back to it. So I'm not even really sure if I want to, but I think that's what they kind of rely on as well. They drag these things out because they know the system is so hard on you anyway as a non-white person, and you probably have other regular things to deal with, and as well as being victimized with the system of race and white supremacy. I mean, to just go into it very, very briefly, though, because I'm talking a lot, but to go into it really briefly, there's quite a few people classified as white making just loads and loads of what they call racist, quote unquote, jokes. And there's no such thing as racist jokes. There's only racist so-called jokes. They're not jokes. They're just aggression, white supremacist aggression. And they always, most of the time, involve some sort of violence, some sort of degradation against people who are classified as not white. And they were doing this for quite a time. And to cut a long story short, I just complained to head office, and I was just I was kind of hounded. To cut a long story short, I was just kind of hounded out of my so-called job, where I was working at this well-known bike place, which I'm not going to give the name of, but it's a well-known bike place over here. And I was ousted from that. So yeah, that's the reason I don't have a job right now.
Thanks for sharing. Before you were less confused about racism and white supremacy, what did you think about white people?
I thought that white men practiced more racism than white women did. And I thought white men were more responsible for the practice of racism, white supremacy, which was a big mistake on my part. You know, I just thought if you cuddle up to the right white woman, then it probably won't be so bad. In my more confused days, that's really what I thought for quite a number of years growing up. quite a lot of white females in England, as people know, and I was quite confused about racism, and obviously in that what they call the white supremacist, what I call the white supremacist controlled media all over the world, really, is white supremacist controlled media. They always push about how they're the most attractive, they're the most beautiful. They are the most competent in everything, and just everything about white is excellent. And things about anything about what they call civilization is great and excellent, and everything that has ever been accomplished, that's ever been of any note, of any worth, has come from white people. And I was very, very confused about that, as I guess most non-white people were and still are, about that everything good comes from white people, everything bad comes from black people. And that's how confused I was. And I'm the only my only source of happiness at the moment is that I'm trying to counter this system in the best way that I can. And another source of quote unquote happiness is that I've been privy to correct information that now I know that that's not true. And I guess I have to be grateful for that, because there's still a lot of non-white people who are very, very, even more confused than I am, that are still in that same place, that think white women can't practice racism, and this whole system of racism, white supremacy, has only been maintained for as long as it has through this whole kind of patriarchy thing. And only if we got rid of patriarchy, we'd also get rid of racism, white supremacy, which is absolute nonsense. This whole system of white supremacy could never have been maintained for as long as it has been without the full cooperation of racist man, racist woman, and racist child as well. I remember when I discovered that racist children, there are such a thing as racist children. I didn't even really think about that. And then when I thought, but the amount of racism we suffered at the hands of children at school, I don't even understand why I had such a hard time actually just bringing all that together in my own head. But such is the programming, such is the miseducation and the indoctrination that the white supremacists are in charge of and push and create and maintain, that it's very hard to come out of that confusion.
Precisely. And greetings to the chat. This is a statement from the chat from Pepe, and this person is saying, before the code, I always lived with the nagging suspicion that something didn't make sense and was missing. And with Neely Fuller Jr. quote, and with the Neely Fuller Jr. quote, I'm pretty sure they're referring to, do you not understand racism and white supremacy, what it is and how it works? Everything you think you know will only confuse you. I'm pretty sure they're referring to that quote. After they read that quote, everything just fell into place. And I get that from what you said. That's how it was for you. Once you begin to learn, like receive counter racist logic, everything just began to make sense. So as you, that's also on the segue into my next question. As you began to become less confused, what are some things that you began to learn about white people and how they practice racism?
as I began, one of the things that changed for me, Dr. Welsing used to say, and Neely Fuller says quite a lot as well, which I'd say probably a lot of non-white people don't really think about. I'm going to go out on a limb and say a lot of us don't think about it. And I definitely didn't think about it.
What happened?
One of the things that really changed for me is that I stopped sleeping with white women. And believe it or not, that was one of the things that I really, really had to be struggling to be codified against, because I couldn't, like how Neely Fuller Jr. says, self-respect is not lying to yourself. And I had a long time battle with, stopping lying to myself. Just a non-constructive activity is definitely non-constructive for non-white people to be, having sexual contact with people who are classified as white in a system of racism, white supremacy. And that was one of the biggest changes in my life, actually, when I come to think about it. That was one of the things I had a lot of difficulty maintaining, because like I said, the programming was so bad that let's just say the programming was really, really bad. So it's really, really strong. So I'd like to say I'm over that now, and so I'm codified in that area, and that's one thing that a lot of people that part of being codified, I found I lost a lot of so-called friends, associates, especially that area as well. Like when we used to quote unquote go out, like they say, and I didn't want to sleep with any white women. If I got offers from white women and I didn't want to sleep with them, that's one of the things they noticed straight away with me about, how I'd only, even some of the non-constructive sexual access I was doing with black females was still, that was still non-constructive, but they definitely noticed that behavior, the change in that behavior, because next to the system of racism, white supremacy, as Neely Fuller Jr. says, sex is another thing that we think about a hell of a lot. And unfortunately, I've come across most black people are that's the other area of activity, sex, that we really, really don't like talking about or thinking about. But white supremacists have definitely done a number on us in that area.
And prior to you becoming less confused, what were your thoughts about non-white people, and what were your thoughts about white people?
I was under the illusion that not all white people are racist.
Hi, James, I have a quick question.
Oh yeah.
How are
tragic? And prior to you becoming less confused, what were your thoughts?
So I'm getting a lot of feedback here. Sorry. Go on, say again. Helen B, did you have a question? Hello.
I think she may be having.
Hello.
I think she may be having technical difficulties.
Okay, sorry. Go on, repeat your question again. There, 05. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, what was your prior to you becoming less confused? What were your thoughts about Black people, and what were your thoughts about white people?
Yeah, not all. My thoughts were largely about white people were. I always just thought white people were racist. Like I said, from when my teacher showed me about that thing, that the gollywog on the back of the white supremacist caricature of a black person on the back of that thing when I was about 6 years old, I couldn't shake it from my mind that white people were racist, right? But then I also thought, well, there's some good white people out there, which I mean, there are some white people who have grown up in this system of racism, but not all white people are racist, and there's a lot of white so-called allies, etc., and not all white people practice racism, and they haven't all been programmed to practice racism, and that's what I thought about white people. And if you just educated white people enough, if you just educate, it's all about education. If you just educate white supremacists enough, or people classified as white, then they probably wouldn't be racist anymore, or you just wouldn't have a system of racism anymore. Or if you were only, if I was nicer to white people, if I was nicer to white people, I don't know, if I gave them a hug, whatever, if I was really, really nice to white people, if I quote unquote spoke well, then, you know, white people probably wouldn't practice racism, white supremacy against me. And that was completely wrong. That was completely wrong. I was very, very confused about that. And with black people, so many different experiences with black people in this system, people classified as black, that white supremacists have classified as black in this system, from the confusion of some of us victims into thinking that if we do harm to another non-white person, the white supremacists will like you better. I've just come across a lot of just anti-blackness from other black people. And yeah, what I used to think of black people as having achieved nothing in terms of what white supremacists had told me what civilization was, from the invention of any things that are constructive. I was always led to believe that black people had nothing to do with any kind of thing that is intelligent, constructive, useful. I just associate a lot of that stuff with people who are classified as white, or even people who were classified as non-white but not black. You know, it's only till I started doing some reading by myself and listening to some other non-white people like Darkest How, etc., like I mentioned before, then I began to get a little more understanding of how the world worked a little better.
And what are your thoughts now on black people and white people, now that you're less confused about the system?
Well, now I know that racism, white supremacy actually really does exist. And now I know that most black people, I think, are probably, if I was to look at it as a percentage wise, I'd say there's probably only about, I don't know, 5%, probably even less than that, of the percentage of black people, specifically black people, around the world who understand what racism, white supremacy is, and actually want to eliminate, and actually are trying to dedicate a lot of their time and energy in actually trying to really counter this system. And it probably might even be less than 5%. I don't know. I think I'm probably being a bit optimistic when I say 5%. In terms of other non-white people, I think they have more of an understanding of what's happening to us. That's only my VGQ. That's just my opinion. I think a lot of other non-white people who are not classified as black can see our plight in this system and where we are in a system of racism, white supremacy. And I think they're kind of content to look on at what's happening to us, and kind of they're sort of thinking to themselves, you know, whilst the black people are at the bottom of this slave ship called racism, white supremacy, at least it's not happening to us. So you know, they're not inspired to help us counter this system of race and white supremacy. But I think even the more confused non-white people understand what racism is, even though they might not have the vocabulary to explain it. But I think they're they really just don't want to face it, because the more you face things, I think then you have a tendency to want to do something about it if you know it's really, really bad. So you know it's bad, but you just don't want to look at it, because if you look at it, then you might have to do something about it.
Smoking damages. How has racist man and racist woman, how do they promote tragic arrangements in the UK?
Through images, through I'd say through their thought, their speech, and their action. They're always promoting themselves as, are you just talking about, so repeat the question again, Helen B, just so I can.
How are they, aka white people, promoting tragic arrangements in the UK?
A lot of the time, just people who are engaged in tragic arrangements, not so much the non-white people who are with these, the person who they're involved in a tragic arrangement with is classified as white. The white person seems to be really, really promoting the idea that tragic arrangements are excellent. They're an excellent idea, and if you sleep with a white person, then racism's on its way out, and there's no need to do anything about this system of racism, white supremacy. If you just have sex with each other, everything will be fine. And this is just a nice visual way, indoctrination, in order to get victims of racism, white supremacy to just be more comfortable on the plantation, basically. And a recent example were these the so-called horror day Christmas ads, right? The horror day Christmas ads, I see it on TV and television all the time recently, right? I don't think I saw one so-called Christmas ad or horror day Christmas ad, whether it's a supermarket, whether it's any other kind of thing, computer store advert on TV, no matter what it was, it just featured some sort of tragic arrangement. So when I say tragic arrangements, for some non-white people listening, I'm talking about sexual relationships between black and white people, or black and any other color of person that is not black, just black with any other person but a black person. And they just promote that all the time. Films, if you look on Netflix, if you just look on regular TV, you look at Sky Cinema, etc., you're pretty much going to see it. It's probably the same over there. It's probably the same over in the part of the world that we call the US. It definitely is the same. It definitely is that way over here in the UK. You just can't move without coming across some sort of programming like that. Just tragic arrangements everywhere you look.
All right, this is a question from the chat from Kwaku. Shout out to you, kind sir. Is
greetings, Kwaku.
Yeah, the Kwaku asks, was there a turning point for Smoking Damages, a specific incident that led him to counter racism?
That led me to counter racism, or to attempt to counter racism. I mean, I think he means attempt to counter racism, probably, because I wish I had, but I definitely haven't countered racism at all. But to try, to try. Really, like I said, when I was 6 years old, I wasn't thinking of countering it, but that's when I first realized that there was something wrong because of what that teacher tried to teach me at that time when I was 6. But then it really was the code. Up until then, I'd been learning about racism, and I'd been trying to understand a bit more about it, and I'd been reading lots of different so-called black scholars, etc. Various books and stuff. Like I said, I've got quite a stack of books, but I have to say, I hadn't encountered any non-white people that was speaking about that in that specific way, like Dr. Welsing and Neely Fuller Jr. was, and Gus T. Renegade as well on the Cows program, Context of White Supremacy. I'd never heard people speak about racism, white supremacy in that kind of way, and about how, you know, we all have that type of responsibility, and, you know, like in terms of it being a reason for your existence, that if you're a non-white person in this system, you have a responsibility. That should be your reason for breathing, right? To actually counter this system. Yeah, is really the turning point. Really was the code. The short answer there really was the Neely Fuller Jr.'s code book concept. What do you call it? United Independent Compensatory Code System concept. Textbook, workbook for victims of racism, white supremacy. Yeah. And before that, I never really wanted to actually kind of get involved, so to speak. You know, I would quote, I'd say a lot of people that would know me, my personal life would probably say I'm quite a technophobe. I wasn't even inspired to do things like that, like get on the internet, get on Instagram or anything and try and, you know, do what I can in this whole war, you know. Yeah, I wasn't tempted to do that until I actually started listening a little bit more and reading the code a bit more. Yeah, that was my turning point. Thanks for the question there, Kwaku.
It sounds like your cosmic duty. It should be all of our cosmic duties to learn about and try to eliminate the system of racism, white supremacy. My question to you, any suggestions on how to dismantle the system?
I think one of the simplest ways, I think, which is one of the hardest ways, but one of the simplest ways is just not over complicating it. Just make every move that you make constructive. Doesn't matter what it is you do, whether you leave your house, make it constructive. And I mean, in this system, the white supremacists have convinced us to be as non-constructive as possible. So in economics, we're convinced to be as non-constructive in economics as possible. In education, they convince us to be as non-constructive as possible. Same way in entertainment. Doesn't matter what you do in entertainment, don't fight racism, white supremacy in entertainment, whatever you do. Don't fight racism, white supremacy in education, no matter what you do. Not in your economics, right? Not in your politics, not in your religion, not in your sex, not in your war, not in your labor. That's all you have to do, I think, I suspect. Counter racism in everything that you do. Counter racism in your economics, counter racism in your education, counter racism in everything that you do. You should be bringing your counter racism with you wherever you go. And the real basic way, another basic way of doing, which I started off saying, is just make everything you do constructive. Everything. If you're going to eat something today, make it constructive. If you're going to drink something, make it constructive. And I mean, when I say constructive, I mean, make it have a constructive, make sure that it's going to have a constructive result in the way that you think, speak, and act. In the way that you think, speak, and act. It doesn't matter what it is. You're going to eat food, make sure that's constructive. You drink, make sure it's constructive. You're going to call up someone on the phone, make sure that conversation is going to have a constructive result. You're going to go down and buy some clothes, ask yourself why you're buying those clothes, right? Why do you want to do it? Like Neely Fuller Jr. says, why do you want to do it? So what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? How do you plan to do it? And number 4, what do you expect the constructive result to be? I suspect it really is that simple, but I think a lot of us, when we think about it, we like to kind of overcomplicate. I think, we're going to have to do this and then. I think it really is that basic. I think really that's I don't even want to say magic because that's a compensatory term. I think that's just the most constructive way to go about it. Make everything you do constructive.
Thank you. And how should non-white people act in relation to white people?
Under what circumstance?
How should non-white people relate to white people as under the system and as we attempt to solve the problem?
Study white people. What I mean by that is study the thing that dominates you. I've certainly, I mean, if I just look at myself down through the years when I was more confused, I just wanted to study other Black people. I wanted to study the achievements of other Black people, which is all well and good if you've been indoctrinated to think that you are just rubbish and everyone that looks like you is rubbish and you just come from rubbish and everyone that looks like you is capable of nothing constructive. I understand why a lot of us would need to undo that programming, and that's all well and good. But I think we should study how and why white people have been able to begin this system, to establish this system of racism, white supremacy, and how have they been able to maintain it? If we don't know that, if we don't know why they're doing it, if we don't know how they're doing it, then it's probably going to make it a little more difficult for us to eliminate that system. So I'd say study white people. Ask questions of white people if you can. If you're around white people, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask them questions. You know, ask them for permission to ask the question. You know, I'll do that. But I'd say study white people, and definitely don't sleep with them because I don't think that's constructive in it, under this system.
What would you say to the non-white person out there who says, "Hey, I got a white friend. You know, he's not racist," or "I got a white girlfriend," or her mom's not racist. They love me. What would you say to those non-white people?
If a non-white person said to me that they have a white friend or that a white person loves them, I'd ask them first to explain to me what love means. How is it possible for love to exist at the same time that a system of racism, white supremacy exists? I'd ask them also to explain how a white person, how anyone actually, but specifically, how can a white person be friends with you in a system of racism, white supremacy? I'd ask them, do you think that white person that calls you their friend, do you think that they contribute in any way to a system of racism, white supremacy? If they do, how? Does that white friend of yours or that white girlfriend of yours or that white girlfriend's family, etc., do these white people contribute to racism, white supremacy in any way? Do they see you, a Black person, do they see you as a victim of the system of racism, white supremacy? Are they bothered about that? Do they actually want to overthrow that system? Do they want to eliminate that system? If they don't want to do any of those things, then I suspect that, I suspect it's probably not possible for them to be your friend. And even if they say they are doing those things, I think you'd have to kind of wait until the system is eliminated before you can call a white person your so-called friend.
Excellent logic. Makes perfect sense to me. Any of the other hosts would like to throw in some questions?
What are some of the mental disruptions that occur when engaged with white people in sexual arrangements?
Um, for me personally, down through the years, I had a lot of cognitive dissonance in that area where I thought, no, actually, no. I can't say I didn't think that the white female was racist. I just didn't want to think about the fact that she was or is racist, if that makes any sense. Yeah, that type of thing. That's one of the sources of confusion there. And I suspect it's the same for a lot of non-white people who are engaged in tragic arrangements with white people. We delude ourselves into thinking that just because we're having sex with a white person, that white person is not racist, or they want to eliminate that system. My codified response to anyone that talks to me about that stuff, I always say sexual intercourse is not a cure for racism, white supremacy. It's not a solution to racism, white supremacy. Slave masters always, a lot of slave masters, I think, is well documented now. Slave masters, males and females, had strong desires to have sex with, rape their slaves, the men, women, and the children, right? And I mean, male, female, and adolescent white slave masters wanted to rape and did rape black males, females, and children. Sexual attraction is sexual attraction. That doesn't mean that they want you to be free. That just means they want sexual access to your body. one definitely should not be mistaken with the other. Yeah, that's what I found. I think most of the time that's one of the most dangerous things in terms of confusing the minds of non-white people. That if you have sexual access to people who are classified as white, all of a sudden everything's okay, everything's brilliant. Under a system of white supremacy, we've been conditioned to think that black is bad, black is unattractive, and blah blah blah. And they burn midnight oil, like Neely Fuller Jr. says, to convince us that white is just this and white's that and white's just fantastic. And if a white person chooses you for sexual access, then you think that white person in some sort of a way confuses us into thinking that they're not practicing racism, which of course they are.
What are some of the terms that you like to use from the code or the word guide, and can you explain those terms that you might use often?
Non-white. I like to use that term non-white. I think it's a constructive term to use rather than people of color, because people of color is a broad term, as is the term non-white. But the difference in non-white and people of color for me is that it puts the onus, non-white, that expression puts the onus on the fact that we're in a system of racism, white supremacy, and that the white supremacists have classified us as non-white, and that they are the only quote unquote race on this planet. People of color just means, to me, it kind of I don't know. For me, that term makes me think, if you're just going to use things like people of color, it's not, for me, it's not clear enough. It's a term that kind of makes white supremacy sort of go into the background a little bit. It's not at the forefront of the mind of people who hear expressions like that. People of color. But if you say non-white and then someone asks you why you're using the term non-white, you say, well, because the white supremacists have classified me as non-white. I don't want them to tell me, I think Neely Fuller Jr. was talking about this as well, that I don't want the slave master to come down to the plantation and tell me that I'm not a slave now, that I'm something else other than a slave, right? If in fact I am a slave. And I think non-white is very, very different to people of color in that way. And also one other phrase as well, tragic arrangements from the code, I think is an excellent way to describe sex between a white person and a non-white person, because it puts emphasis on the fact that they are tragic. These arrangements are tragic. It's not love relationship. You can't have love and white supremacy on the same planet at the same time. So that's another useful phrase I found out the code book. And obviously the first page where Mr. Fuller said, if you do not understand racism, which is white supremacy, everything else that you understand will confuse you.
Thank you.
If you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you.
Thank you, Helen B. Yes.
All right. Sorry Case says victims cannot truly have friends until racism and white supremacy is eliminated. Sounds accurate. And Kweku has another question. How has attempting to practice counter racism affected you and the relationship with your victim unit? Excellent question.
In some ways, I guess, in some ways, it's depressed me. Well, at first it did depress me when, a lot of people that I recognize as family, my attempted family and associates, etc., probably every Black person I know actually began to sort of recoil away from me. And and first of all, I used to think of it as, or I used to feel it. I used to think, oh, I'm just losing friends or so-called friends, so like associates of mine and things, and my attempted family are, kind of shying away from me, and because I'm starting to question what they say more and question their activities if they want me to be involved in some what I consider non-constructive activity. And I said no, and they asked me why not, and then I explained to them. They didn't really like my explanations because obviously they wanted to just carry on with the non-constructive activity and was disappointed that I didn't want to join them in the non-constructive activity. So at first I used to look at that as, that used to really, I'll just say straight up, it just used to really piss me off, right? And it just used to really depress me, because the more you become, or the more I became a little more codified, and I wouldn't even say I'm in anywhere near as codified as I should be, as I need to be. I'm nowhere near where I need to be, but even as far as I am now, yeah, it's codification I found can be and is a lot of times a lonely road, very, very lonely road. And but also I have to echo what Helen B was saying in the chat yesterday that we had. Actually, no contact, no conflict. A lot of these associations I had were not very constructive associations anyway, when I really look at it. So the less that they wanted to contact me and the less I was in contact with them, no contact, no conflict. And a lot of ways it's kind of improved a lot of those relationships. So shouts to you, Helen B, for your comment yesterday. I echo that.
Thank you. When you were less confused, how was your consumption of Area 3 content entertainment?
when I was more confused or less. You said less confused. Am I?
Oh no, when you're more confused. How does it compare to being non-confused? I mean, less confused.
I just look at entertainment in a completely different way now. What I used to think was entertaining, so-called entertaining, has just taken on a whole new meaning. And it's not to say that sometimes I don't engage in watching some of these things that I think are non-constructive, but I like to think that I turn them I turn these non-constructive forms of entertainment into a constructive experience for myself if I choose to watch them. So now I can't help but see the racism in everything that I watch that's supposedly supposed to be entertainment. I can't help but see it now. Even if I didn't want to see it, I would just see it. Because racism's in, as far as I'm concerned, everything that we call so-called entertainment. Yeah, from the comedy things I used to see. I mean, I used to watch stupid things like South Park. I don't watch South Park anymore unless I'm trying to specifically decode an episode or point out the racism for someone else. But I don't watch things like that. And yeah, so-called jokes, because I mean, white supremacist jokes, I mean, they're always most of the time on Black people. You know, we're always the butt of the joke. The so-called joke, should I say? There's no such thing as a racist joke. They're not jokes. And yeah, so that's why I used to just always be consumed with just silly, trashy horror films. And I mean, I'm a massive horror film buff. I still like watching the odd horror film. Most of the time, it's a white supremacist horror film, white supremacist made horror film, and stuff. But I try to watch it. If I am gonna watch something like that, then like I say, I'm gonna see the racism in it anyway. And then yeah, there's so much trash, so I kind of limit any kind of form of entertainment, so to speak. I try to make it educational rather than just solely entertainment for entertaining purposes. Because really, if you're just out there to be entertained whilst you're in a war, entertained whilst you're on the battlefield, then what the hell are you doing, right? I don't really want to be entertained whilst I'm on the battlefield. I actually just want to focus on fixing the problem. So I try to limit so-called entertaining myself as much as possible.
Pepe says from the chat, estrangement with family and friends is when you feel the idea and importance of a care unit based on justice. Precisely. It reminds me of what you said a little bit earlier. Miss B, do you have any other questions? And folks in the chat, please send your questions along.
Whilst everyone's getting their questions together, in terms of entertainment as well, this recent kind of horror day, so-called Christmas and New Year's, just stupid behavior. I just mention. On the way here, I did visit my victim mother. Went to see some family down at her house, her home. Well, her dwell space. And on the way there and on the way back, 3 white supremacists that were drunk tried to hug me and tried to, wish me a happy new year and stuff like that. Really tacky stupidness. And I just saw probably about a good 100, 150 drunk white people just doing stupid stuff, trying to get me involved in the stupidity as well, trying to, come over here and have a drink with us, we're having a party over here and blah blah blah, and just trying to get me to do some non-constructive, tacky, trashy, stupid activity, and probably when I was in my more confused days, people that I grew up with around here, I probably would have went to one of these stupid things, these stupid so-called parties or celebrations for this New Year's, quote unquote, New Year's celebration. And, I probably would have got drunk, probably would have done some non-constructive sex and other kind of stupid stuff, tacky, trashy stuff. And probably if I didn't want to get involved in it, it probably might have turned terroristic as well. So, I'm glad I'm a little less confused now and I can just say no to these things.
Do you think it was harder for you to spend your time and energy being constructive when you were more confused?
Do I think it was harder for me to spend my time and energy being constructive when I was more confused?
Yes.
Oh yeah, most of my time was spent. Like I say, it's probably at about what did I say before? It's probably about 80 or 90% non-constructive before, and it's probably about maybe 60% constructive, or maybe 50%. I don't know on some days, but it's creeping up. It's a work in progress. And it was definitely, when I was more confused, it was definitely it was a lot harder to stay focused and do things that were constructive. Even when I thought I was doing things that were constructive, it just wasn't. It was just me giving myself an excuse to be silly, probably. And so it's a lot easier now that I'm attempting to be more codified, to be a bit more constructive. Like I said today, I probably could have just been out partying right now and having a Guinness and doing whatever, just doing some drinking alcohol and just being really silly. But I'm having constructive dialogue with other attempted counter racists. I hope it is constructive.
Thank you. I think it has been so far. Most certainly. So I'm trying to figure out which one I should ask first. Okay, yeah. So as you've studied the concept of counter racism, what are some counter racist materials that you would recommend to other victims of racism, non-white people out there who may have the will to do something about their predicament?
When I first started listening to Dr. Welsing and Neely Fuller Jr., I would say because at that time I hadn't heard Gus T. Renegade broadcast on the cows. That's context of white supremacy, abbreviated as the cows, and I'd definitely recommend that non-white people go and check out Gus T. Renegade's broadcast, because I was very, very confused in terms of how white people, lots of people, most people, probably all white people who can practice racism, white supremacy, are able to practice that, probably do practice that. And I think it's very important for us as non-white people to hear, experience, right, really listen to what happens when someone, a non-white person, is less confused, challenges or questions a person who's classified as white, and see how they answer questions and see how they end up displaying their racism. And if you are a non-white person and you haven't heard that, you haven't experienced that, and you're still under the illusion that most white people don't practice racism, white supremacy, I'd say listen to the effect of a white person being questioned by a non-white person who's less confused. Check out Gus T. Renegade's show, and don't believe me, listen for yourself. And I think more non-white people, if we actually checked out Gus T. Renegade on the cows, I think a lot of us would become a hell of a lot less confused, whatever a hell of a lot means. But I think we'd be just a lot less confused than we are. So Neely Fuller Jr.'s code book, Dr. Welsing's code book, Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization, any Dr. Ben book, John Henry Clark books, Drusilla Donji's Ethiopia, I can't remember the title. Iceman Inheritance as well. If anyone's familiar with that book as well. Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews as well. Interesting book series, actually. I thought I knew everything about so-called the transatlantic slave trade. Turns out I didn't know very much. There's just tons and tons of books I could recommend, as well as Gus T. Renegade's broadcast, and there's also there's a guy called I think it's Wolfen Schmidt, who did that book called 10 Little Niggers as well. It's a white German man wrote this book called 10 Little Niggers. I definitely would recommend non-white people check that book out as well. It just goes into what white people have been learning, people who are classified as white have been learning about Black people, how they've actually just been teaching themselves in school, what they call school, teaching themselves about us in school. It's definitely revealing. So yeah, definitely check out the cows. Definitely check out Neely Fuller Jr. Go to producejustice.com and listen to what Neely Fuller Jr. has to say, and purchase a copy of the code book. Purchase a copy of Dr. Welsing's code book, The ISIS Papers as well. And obviously tune into this broadcast as well. Oh, and if you're that way inclined as well, just subscribe to my channel as well on Instagram. It's Reviews Room, Reviews and RM, Reviews RM on Instagram, and also I'm on YouTube under Smoking Damages.
Thank you. This is a question from Tam Watkins from the chat. What's a good way to initiate dialogue about racism and white supremacy to my brother who's married to a white woman?
Repeat the question again, sorry?
What's a good way to initiate dialogue about RWS to my brother who's married to a WW?
The best way to initiate dialogue. Okay. Depending on how confused he is, you could just ask him about what he thinks. Yeah, just ask him questions like ask him what his definition for racism is. Ask him what he thinks. Yeah, ask him what he thinks racism is, first of all. Ask him, does he think racism is a problem? Ask him if he wants to see an end, an elimination to racism. Ask him if he thinks racism is a system. Ask him, does he suspect that his wife could be one of the white people that practice racism? And see what he says. Don't help him with the answers. Don't help him with the answers at all. Don't interrupt what he has to say. You're trying to get what you're trying to understand what he thinks about what racism is and what he thinks about the person he's tragically arranged with. So yeah, ask him questions about her. Does he suspect that she practices racism against him? Does he think that white people, including the white person that he's with, the white female that he's with, do white people on this planet right now have more power than people who they classify as black? Is that true or is that false? And is that white person one of those people that has more power than him? Just ask him questions like that, and hopefully that might make him think. It might kind of coax him into thinking about that problem as it relates to the person, the white female that he's with, rather than him looking at racism as something else that doesn't involve the white female that he's tragically arranged with. There might be some more questions that you could probably ask him. Maybe, yeah, actually, you could probably ask him, in a system of racism, does he think that black people have been indoctrinated to think of people who are classified as white as more sexually attractive than black people? Does he think that's possible? Ask him those questions, those bunch of questions, and see how he responds. Little by little, you might be able to get him to be less confused. Be very, very patient with him, though. Don't bombard him. No name calling. Don't name call him. Be very, very, very patient. That's one thing I learned becoming a little more codified, is to stop name calling other black people. Your brother is not the problem. People who are less confused, non-white people who are more confused, about racism, white supremacy, are not the problem. The problem is racist man and racist woman and their indoctrination of non-white people. That's the problem. If you get rid of the system, you also get rid of the confusion that goes along with that system. So your sibling there has been confused. So be very, very patient with him on how you pose those questions.
Alrighty, and this is from Helen B. She says, "Can you explain the code in under 3 minutes?"
What aspect of the code? I didn't understand. She'll probably have to be a bit more specific with the question.
We'll have to put it on the back burner until she can clarify. But she has another question. Have you ever visited the so-called Caribbean islands?
No, I haven't, and my attempted mother is from the Caribbean island known as Grenada, and my attempted father is from the so-called Caribbean islands known as Barbados. And I did have a chance to visit Grenada, the place known as Grenada, when I was probably mid-20s. And I was really confused. I'm just going to admit this, right? I was really, really confused, and I had the chance to kind of spend some more time in a tragic arrangement at the time, and I didn't take the opportunity to go and visit the so-called Caribbean. I didn't take up the opportunity to go and visit Grenada, which is, looking back on it now, I do regret that, because we just would have. I would have just been able to experience just a different part of the world, what we call a different part of the planet. So yeah, I haven't visited that area of the world, no.
Would you like to share an experience that you've had with a white woman that kidnapped you and raped you? Just to elaborate, just the power dynamic and reality that Black people and white people have.
Well, in terms of it being really, really non-constructive, I mean, even like I said, that time when I had time to spend, I had the opportunity to spend a bit more time and probably go and see some so-called attempted family that I hadn't seen before in another part of the planet. I was just in this thing which fizzled out as well, which was non-constructive, and because I was so confused, I actually preferred to do that than do something a bit more constructive, right? And actual experiences, like some experiences, there's just been all of those so-called relationships have been just tragic, silly, tacky, non-constructive. I mean, I've never been a what they call a drug user and stuff, but the first time I actually saw drugs was when I was with a white woman. The first time I ever saw drugs, like just white people just openly just taking drugs, were at some parties that I used to go to with white females. And like I think I said before on this channel quite a few times, if you just look at white supremacist media, they'd have you believe that drugs is a Black person's problem and Black people do drugs and blah blah blah. No. I mean, if you only look for drugs on Black people, then that's where you're going to find it. If you only look for knives in, I don't know, your next door neighbor's house, then guess where all the knives will be? They'll be in your next door neighbor's house, because that's the only place you're looking for it. If you're only going to look for drugs in the back pocket of some person who's classified as Black walking down the street, then that's where you're going to find the drugs. But I know that this is the experience of a lot of non-white people. The people who are doing most of the drugs and the people who are getting making most of the money off of what we call drugs is people who are classified as white. Definitely 100%. And whilst I was in these tragic relationships, that's what I was exposed to the most. Just a lot of non-constructive, stupid tackiness, just that was just on the way to just kind of making me do just really, really non-constructive things. Just nothing. I mean, forget about countering racism. Just go out, just have sex with white females, go clubbing, go to the pub, do just non-constructive, silly, tacky stuff.
As it has been designed. So my final question is, what has been the constructive results from you attempting to practice counter racism?
The constructive result,
what have been the constructive results, if any?
The only constructive thing so far, I'd say, is that I've been able to learn a little more about what racism, white supremacy is. That's the only thing so far that has been constructive. And the more I talk about it, the more probably I've been able to being introduced to other people who are also trying their best to counter the system in the best way that they think they can as well. That's being constructive, and that's also taught me a lot more about how this system works, what this system is and how it works. But obviously the frustrating thing is that we haven't solved it, so no gold stars to anybody, no I can't award any gold stars to anybody yet, because none of us have solved it. I do admire some of the efforts of some non-white people's, some non-white people's dedication, and I wish this is what my attempt is. My attempt is to be a lot more dedicated than I have been in trying to counter it. So one of the constructive things is it's kind of spurred me on to be a little more dedicated to eliminating the system, or find better ways to eliminate it. Than I'd thought of before.
All right, my actual final question is thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. My actual final question is why do you suspect a system of justice would be better than a system of racism, white supremacy?
I suspect that it will be better because a system of justice is, as described in the code book, is guaranteeing that guaranteeing that no one is mistreated, first of all, no one, and guaranteeing that those who need help the most are guaranteed the most constructive help, are given the most constructive help. And I think because we don't have that now, I don't know what a system of justice looks like, but I suspect it would be a lot better than than being dominated and mistreated based on color. I think it's justice by, I think according to logic, justice must be better than a system of racism, white supremacy, because I am one of the people who's subjugated by that system, and it's not a good place to be in. And it's like, the way I look at it is like, this is going to be a metaphor. Should I do this metaphor? Okay, I'm going to try a slight metaphor here, or analogy, should I say, rather than a metaphor, an analogy, where I'd say it's, would you rather be in a house where there's 10 people in this house and everyone is dedicated to looking after themselves as individuals, or would you rather live in a house where 9 of those people are geared towards helping you, and you and the other 9, you're dedicated to helping these other 9 people, so everyone's dedicated to helping each other? I'd rather live in a place like that, where everyone is dedicated to helping each other, rather than just everyone's dedicated to helping themselves. So if justice is that guaranteeing that everyone who needs help the most is given the most constructive help, then that's the kind of planet that I want to be living in, rather than a system of racism, white supremacy.
Wow, I love the logic. Oh, said the L word. Well, I appreciate that logic a lot. I like to give you the floor, let folks know where they can find your content, and as we close out.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram on Reviews Room. That's reviews as in just REVIEWSRM, Reviews Room on Instagram. And you can also find me on YouTube on Smoking Damages, under Smoking Damages on YouTube. So subscribe. I try and post. I'll try, definitely. That's definitely something I've got to do more of. I'll try and post a little bit more content on on my social media as and when I find constructive things to share with other attempted counter racists. Hopefully, hopefully I can redouble my efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Smoky Damages, and as always, thanks to the chat. Appreciate the audience. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe to get this information to more non-white people and help to develop the effective numbers of non-white people who will produce a system of justice.
And thanks for everyone that asked questions as well.
Oh yeah, of course, excellent. The day is so-called January 1st, 2022. We hope that this broadcast was of constructive value. I hope that you codify your thoughts, speech, and behavior and develop that effective number so we can solve this problem ASAP. Would you like to share anything else before we close out, Mr. Smoky Damages?
Pay attention to the words. Pay attention to the words that racist man and racist woman use. Pay attention to terms like white privilege. Pay attention to terms like unconscious bias. Pay attention to terms like people of color. Pay attention to terms like just pay attention to words like stupid and silly when they're really talking about people who are practicing racism. Just pay attention to obfuscatory language. Definitely pay attention to things like that because they control. Racist man and racist woman they enjoy controlling and distracting us with words through their use of words. They're experts at distraction through the use of words. So stay in the question lane. Don't help them with the answer. Just ask questions. Question. What does white privilege mean? How do you receive these privileges? Isn't it a system of racism, white supremacy, rather than a system of white privilege? Ask them if what happened to the non-white people in South Africa under what they call apartheid, is that a system of white privilege or is that a system of white power? Is that a system of white domination? Is it a system of white supremacy? Get them to explain to you what it is they actually mean when they say what they say. And hopefully we can get some more clarity and not so much confusion when dealing with this with racist man and racist woman.
Thank you so much, Smoking Damages. And again, to the audience, we will solve the race problem. A system of justice will be produced. CRWS signing out.